They were shown in villages, schools, and public grounds as propaganda films. The goal wasn't entertainment, it was control, education, and influence. What's good, Africa? This is Cinematic Africa by BB Films. Before Netflix, before YouTube, before we even called ourselves filmmakers, films were already shaping how Kenya was seen and how Kenyans saw themselves. But here's the twist. Kenyan cinema didn't start with Kenyan telling Kenyan stories. That changed everything. So the big question is, how did film come to Kenya? And here it is. Film arrived in Kenya in the early 1900s, but not as art, but it came as a tool. During the colonial era, especially from the 1930s to the late 1950s, films were introduced through mobile cinemas run by British film units. They were shown in villages, schools, and public grounds as propaganda films. The goal wasn't entertainment, it was control, education, and influence. But accidentally, something important happened. Kenyans fell in love with a moving image. The audience was born even before the industry. Kenya was used as a location, but still didn't have a voice. So by the 1950s, to the 1980s, Kenya became favorite location for Hollywood and Europe. Big films like Born Free, There Will Be Conspiracy, Kenyan Solomon Mines, and Let Out of Africa were shot here. Kenyan landscape were everywhere, but Kenyan voices were missing. Yes, locals worked as extras, drivers, fixers, and crew. Some learned the craft this way, but creatively, Kenya was still a background character in its own story. So, the first Kenyan filmmakers, of course. The real shift begins in the 1980s. One name matters here, Sao Gamba. Sao Gamba, get it right. In 1985, he directed Column Mask, widely cited as one of the first Kenyan feature films driven by Kenyan creative intent. It dealt with identity, culture conflict. Then came Hilary Kweno, journalist, documentarian, historian, and he's used his documentaries and television work to do what everyone was not doing, preserve Kenyan culture. In 1992, history was made. Anne Mungai released Saikati, a film about a young girl resisting forced marriages to pursue education. It became one of the most important Kenyan films ever made, not because it was flashy, but because it was ours. So, in the mid-1990s, Wanjiru Kinyanjui directed The Battle of the Sacred Tree, a Kenyan feature that screened internationally. By this point, Kenyan cinema had three things it lacked before. Kenyan directors, Kenyan stories, and Kenyan intent. But distribution was still weak, budgets were tiny, audiences were limited, but the foundation was finally real. In 2005, the Kenyan Film Commission was established. Training programs, festivals, and workshops followed. Then the films started landing. Example, From a Whisper, 2008 by Wanuri Kahio. First Grader in 2010, Nairobi Half-Life, the most famous of them all, 2012, Something Necessary in 2013, Supermodel, 2018, Likariono by Rikandio Wainaina, that one I know, Rafiki 2018, which was a bit controversial, but these films traveled to Kenya. So what does it mean? For the first time, Kenyan cinema wasn't asking for permission, it was being invited. Not asking for permission, but being invited. The audience and the reality check. Here comes the twist. Kenyan audiences have always been ready. Yes, but there's a problem. The problem has never been interest, it has been access, funding, and distribution. When films reflect real Kenyan lives, languages, and struggles, people show up. The industry's biggest challenge today isn't talent, it's infrastructure, the gear, the funding, as I've said earlier. So everything trickles down to that. That's why we are not yet to the Hollywood level, but We are getting there. Kenyan cinema didn't start perfect. It started borrowed, controlled, and external, but pioneers pushed anyway. So if you're a filmmaker watching this, understand this. You are not late. You are not late. You are actually early.